I am your instructor, Dr. Alam. In today's lecture, we will discuss the GDP and economic welfare. As in the previous lecture, we have discussed the difference between GDP and GNP. The outline of this particular lecture is further divided into submain two topics. One is how GDP can promote economic welfare, and in this particular welfare topic we will discuss the availability of goods and services, and health and education, while in the case of that how the GDP is not connected or is not related to the economic well-being, in this particular aspect we will discuss leisure time, non-market economic activities, environmental quality and resource depletion, quality of life, poverty and economic inequality. GDP and economic well-being. The real GDP, or simply we can say that GDP per person, does tend to be positively associated with many things people value that will be included a higher material standard of living. Means when there is an increase or when the real GDP is increased, it means more and more goods and services will be produced. It means the material standard of living will be improved. That, for example, we have more availability of food items, we will have more availability of motor cars, televisions, furniture, etc. Better health and life expectancies is when the GDP is much higher, it means the health facilities will be much higher and the life expectancy, the average age of the people will be higher. Better education is more and more GDP of a particular economy, the spending on education will be much higher and the education facilities will be more. That was the general overview of the GDP and economic well-being. When we particularly discuss that how GDP can promote the economic well-being, so the first point is the availability of goods and services. Citizens of a country with a higher or high GDP are likely to possess more and better goods and services. On average, people in high GDP countries enjoy large, better constructed and more comfortable homes, higher quality food and clothing, a greater variety of entertainment and cultural opportunities, better access to transportation and travel. For example, if you look at the comparison between the developing countries and the developed world, like Europe and America, so the developed world have a higher GDP, so they have ultimately they have more constructed homes, better quality of food and clothing, a great variety of entertainment and cultural opportunities, and better access to transportation and travel, and better communication and sanitation and other advantages, while these facilities are not available in the case of in developing world. Why? because the GDP of this developed world is much lesser as compared to the developed world. The second point in the GDP and economic well-being is the health and education, and this can be easily explained in this particular table, the GDP and basic indicators of well-being. The indicators and here like GDP per person, total population, life expectancy, under 5 mortality rate, expected years of schooling. Then we have different categories of the countries: very high human developed countries, high human development, medium human development, low human development. In this particular table, you can easily predict or conclude that GDP per person, by GDP per person we mean that when we divide the GDP by total population, so very high human development means the advanced economy, the GDP per person is 32,931, while the high human development is 11,572, in the medium human development is 5,203, while in the low human development is 1,621. Why this is much higher, the GDP per capita or per person in the high human, because they have much higher GDP. And from the first row we can easily understand, if you look at the life expectancy rate. So the life expectancy rate in the very high human development is much higher, that is 80.1 as compared to the low human development, because they have the higher GDP. Then when we look at the mortality rate, the infant mortality rate, the death is much lesser in the developed world as compared to the low human development. Then again, the developed world have higher GDP, so they can spend more and more on the health. Then when we look at the expected years of schooling, so that is in the developed world that is 16.3, while in the extreme case in the low human development, like in the developing or the least developing countries, that is 8.5. So this case easily explains the health and education position of the developed world and the underdeveloped world. That how GDP is not the same as economic well-being. So the first topic is the GDP is not the same as economic well-being, is the leisure time. In the case of the leisure time, if you look at like in the recent time, the people are giving less time to work, but more time is available to workers for leisure, which allow them to pursue many worthwhile activities, like they have more time for family, for friends, participating in sports and hobbies, and pursuing cultural and educational activities. All these 3-4 points explain much benefit of living in a wealthy society. These extra hours of leisure are not priced in the market, and therefore they are not reflected in the GDP. The second point in the GDP is not the same as economic well-being is the non-market economic activities. There are certain activities that are more. Then the third point that is explained that how GDP is not the same as economic well-being is the environmental quality and resource depletion. As we know that when there is increase in the GDP, that will generate more and more pollution. China has recently experienced tremendous growth in the real GDP, but in expanding its manufacturing base, it also has suffered a severe decline in air and water quality, means there is an increase in pollution. Water pollution and air pollution. But because air and water quality are not bought or sold in the market, therefore the Chinese GDP does not reflect this downside of its economic growth. The fourth point that explains the GDP is not the same as economic well-being is the quality of life. What makes, there are certain questions, what makes a particular town or city an attractive place for to live? Some desirable features you might think of reflecting in the GDP. That will be more spacious, well constructed homes, good restaurants, stores, variety of entertainment, high quality of medical services. However, other indicators of good life are not sold in the market and so may be omitted in the GDP. Example include low crime rate, minimum traffic congestion, active civic organization, and open space. These were all about this today lecture. For more details, the reference material, that is the principles of macroeconomics. These are the authors, and the particular chapter is chapter number 4, and the title of the chapter is Income, Spending and GDP, and the page number is 134 140. Take care. Bye. See you.